Why is everyone in their 30s always so tired? I was in my 30s and I was tired all the time. I was working a full-time job, raising 2 young kids, and trying to keep up with all the demands of life. I was constantly running on empty, and I felt like I was barely keeping my head above water. One day, I was at the grocery store with my kids. I was exhausted, and I was trying to get through the checkout line as quickly as possible. My kids were being their usual rambunctious selves, and I was starting to lose my patience. Just then, a woman in her 60s came up to me. She smiled at me and said, "I remember those days. It gets easier, I promise." I was taken aback by her words. I didn't know this woman, but she seemed to understand exactly what I was going through. Her words gave me a glimmer of hope that things would get better. A few years later, I was in my 40s. My kids were older and more independent, and I had more time for myself. I was still busy, but I wasn't as exhausted as I used to be. One day, I was at the grocery store, and I saw a woman in her 30s with 2 young kids. She looked exhausted, and her kids were being just as rambunctious as mine used to be. I smiled at her and said, "I remember those days. It gets easier, I promise." She looked at me with the same surprised expression that I had given the woman years before. I could see the hope in her eyes, and I knew that my words had given her a little bit of comfort.